The chandelier's light fractured into 1,000 pieces, scattering across polished marble floors. Silence in the luxury store held for only a breath, then shattered. "Get out of my store." The words were sharp as glass, hurled across the room by the store manager. She was pale, mid-40s, hair cut into a perfect blonde bob, navy suit pressed as if power could be ironed into fabric. Her hand rose, then cut down like a verdict. The crack of skin on skin echoed beneath the chandelier. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Customers froze mid-step. Security guards in pale gray uniforms stiffened, folding their arms but not intervening. The crowd became a jury, summoned without consent. At the center of it stood her. The woman the manager had chosen to humiliate, a black woman, mid-30s, standing steady in a cream sweater and dark trousers. No diamonds, no designer logos. Her hair pulled into braids, twisted high, not for style, but for clarity, nothing to hide behind. She didn't raise a hand, didn't flinch. Her face held the stillness of stone carved by storms. The slap landed, but her dignity did not move. Around her, whispers began. Did she just... Why would she hit her? She hasn't done anything. But the manager wasn't finished. Her voice tore into the silence again, louder, angrier, as if volume could disguise fear. "People like you don't belong here. You can't afford to touch a single thing in this place." The insult cut deeper than the slap. Not because it was true, but because it was rehearsed, scripted arrogance, sharpened by years of unchecked power. A guard's hand hovered over his radio. Another clerk smirked under her breath. A young woman near the handbags raised her phone, red light blinking, capturing every second. Still, the black woman remained still, calm, centered. She had seen this scene before in banks, in hotels, at airports. Different uniforms, same energy. Different rooms, same verdict. Her silence wasn't surrender, it was patience. The crowd didn't know her name. They only saw a woman in plain clothes, outnumbered, insulted, cornered. To them, she was nobody. And yet, in less than 10 minutes, she would own the room because she already did. But that moment hadn't arrived yet. For now, tension was the only currency, and the store manager was spending it recklessly. "Security," the woman in the navy suit barked. "Remove her, now." Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to her. The guards shifted forward, their badges catching the light. The crowd leaned in, phones lifted higher. Justice or cruelty was about to be recorded. The woman in the cream sweater didn't blink. Her silence was not weakness. It was the prelude to a storm. She stood where the slap had landed, still as marble beneath the chandelier. The crowd expected outrage, maybe even tears, but she gave them none. Her silence wasn't absence, it was control. The manager's breathing grew heavy, lips curled into a thin sneer. "Do you hear me? You're done here." She spoke like someone used to obedience, as if volume could make her words law. But the woman in the cream sweater didn't bow to laws written by arrogance. Her name, though no one here knew it yet, was Elise Monroe. Mid-30s, tall, posture upright but not stiff. Her sweater was plain, soft against her skin, paired with dark trousers and simple flats. No jewelry clinked under the lights. No brand screamed from her shoulders. She looked ordinary by design. What the room couldn't see was the weight she carried, the kind of weight you don't wear, you own. Elise's calm wasn't new. At 23, she had walked into a dealership with her first commission check, only to be laughed out of the room. At 28, she tried to open an account in a private bank, only to be told her funds looked suspicious. At 32, a hotel manager in Chicago insisted her reservation must be fake because people like you don't book penthouse suites. Each scene etched into memory, each insult added to her quiet armor. This one felt no different. Same room, different wallpaper. Her eyes swept the store without rushing. She saw security flanking the walls, their arms crossed like a gate she wasn't meant to pass. She saw the customers, some whispering in disgust, others frozen with uncertainty. And she saw the clerk behind the counter, smirking like injustice was entertainment. Elise breathed once, slow and deliberate. The slap stung her cheek, but it didn't sting her spirit. She knew what the manager didn't, The chain of luxury stores, the chandeliers, the marble floors, all of it, line by line, belonged to her. But revelation has its timing, and this was not that moment. Not yet. So she stayed quiet, letting the insult echo, letting the arrogance stretch thin. She understood something the manager didn't. The longer silence holds, the heavier it becomes when it breaks. The young woman near the handbags raised her phone higher. Her voice shook but carried, "This isn't right." A ripple passed through the crowd. A middle-aged man frowned. A mother clutched her daughter's hand tighter. The tension in the room wasn't just Elise's anymore, it was collective. The manager noticed the shift and snapped, "Don't film this. She's a thief. She doesn't belong here." The accusation was tossed like gasoline onto a growing fire. Elise's jaw tightened for the first time, but her voice didn't rise. She whispered, low and steady, only 3 words, "Let them watch." The clerk's smirk faltered. The guard's hand froze above his radio. The crowd leaned in, because the woman who seemed like nobody had just spoken like someone who had nothing to fear, and in truth, she didn't. The air in the store had shifted. What began as a slap was turning into spectacle. The chandelier still glowed bright, but the atmosphere was heavy, charged like a courtroom with no judge. The manager planted her heels into the marble, voice rising, "Security, this woman is trespassing. Remove her immediately." 2 guards peeled from the wall, moving with practiced indifference. Their uniforms crisp, radios clipped tight to their belts. They didn't question, didn't hesitate. To them, she was just another problem to escort out, but Elise Monroe did not move. "You heard me," the manager snapped. "Get her out before she embarrasses herself further." A ripple of laughter followed from behind the counter. A clerk barely 25, slim tie hanging loose, snorted, "She probably can't afford a single bag in here. Look at her." His words weren't loud, but they carried, slicing through the murmurs like a blade. A woman near the jewelry case gasped. A man whispered to his companion, "This is going too far." But no one stepped forward. Not yet. The guards advanced. One placed his hand lightly on Elise's arm, as if to test whether she would resist. The crowd tensed, phones tilted higher. The red recording lights glowed like witnesses in silence. Elise didn't resist. She didn't recoil. Her voice came quiet, level, but clear enough to travel across the room. "Think carefully before you touch me again." The guard hesitated, his hand hovering just above her sleeve, caught between authority and uncertainty. The manager scoffed, "Oh, please. You're lucky we don't call the police. Fake cards, fake image, fake status. People like you are dangerous to real clients." She leaned in closer, her perfume sharp, her words sharper. "We know the type." That phrase, "the type," hung in the air like poison. The young woman filming whispered to her phone, "She hasn't done anything. They're just profiling her." Her voice trembled but didn't stop. Somewhere across the store, another phone lifted. Then another. Elise stood still, her face calm, but inside her memory replayed every time she'd heard that phrase before. The type. At 23, at 28, at 32. The years blurred into one long insult. And now, here it was again, dressed in a navy suit and power that wasn't real. The manager turned to the guards again, louder this time. "Remove her. If she resists, detain her until the police arrive." The word police sent a chill through the crowd. A mother pulled her daughter closer. A man muttered, "This is about to get ugly." But Elise's eyes stayed fixed, unblinking. The clerk smirked once more. "Honestly, she's wasting everyone's time. Why don't we just throw her out already?" Gasps spread. Phones tilted higher, and through it all, Elise remained silent. Her silence wasn't surrender. It was a fuse. And the manager had no idea how close she was to lighting it. The guard's hand hovered above Elise's arm, the crowd holding its breath. All it would take was one small push, one act of force, and the scene would collapse into chaos. But Elise did not move. Her stillness wasn't fear, it was strategy. The manager smirked at the silence, mistaking it for surrender. "See? Nothing to say, because she doesn't belong here." Her words dripped with satisfaction, as though victory came in the form of public humiliation. Elise's eyes did not flinch. She blinked once, slowly, and kept her gaze fixed on the marble floor just beyond the manager's shoulder. To anyone watching, it looked like passivity. To Elise, it was patience in motion. A murmur rolled through the customers. Some looked uneasy. Others crossed their arms, unwilling to intervene. The young woman filming whispered into her phone, She's not fighting back. She's just standing there. And that was the point. Because Elise knew the power of restraint. Years earlier, at 23, she had shouted back once, voice cracking with frustration in a dealership lobby. The laughter that followed had burned into her memory. Rage, she learned, was the reaction they wanted. Silence, she discovered, was the response they feared. So she stood still now, body tall, shoulders set, hands folded in front of her. The clerk behind the counter scoffed. She's frozen, probably knows she's caught. His smirk widened. Wait until the cops get here. But Elise's silence unsettled more than it reassured. The guard closest to her shifted uneasily, his hand falling back to his side. His radio buzzed once, but he didn't answer. He had expected resistance. Not this. The manager stepped closer, voice slicing the air. Why aren't you saying anything? Do you think your silence makes you innocent? It makes you look guilty. The insult rang out across the store, bouncing off glass cases and polished marble. Yet Elise did not blink. The customers felt it now, that weight of silence pressing in on the room. A man near the entrance muttered, "She's not even raising her voice." A woman beside him whispered back, "That's what makes this worse." Elise's stillness was not empty. It was charged. Every second she remained quiet. The tension thickened. Her thoughts wandered, not out of distraction but memory. At 16, she had waited in a hotel lobby in Charlotte, dressed in her Sunday best, only to be told the space was for guests only. The shame had burned then, but today it burned differently. It forged, and so she waited. The manager mistook this for weakness, puffing her chest with borrowed authority. "Enough of this performance," she barked. "Security! Drag her out!" The crowd tensed again, phones lifted higher. But Elise only breathed once, calm and deep. Her silence was not submission. It was the sound of a storm gathering strength. The chandelier hummed quietly overhead, but the air beneath it was alive, buzzing with tension. Elise stood motionless, the sting of the slap still fading on her cheek, her silence now pressing against every wall. The crowd could no longer pretend this was routine. Phones shifted, tilted higher, small red lights blinking like restless eyes. What had begun as a spectacle was turning into evidence. Near the handbag display, a young woman with dark hair and a denim jacket raised her phone steadily. Her voice trembled but carried, "This isn't right. She hasn't done anything." Heads turned. Customers who had been frozen in discomfort now murmured openly. A middle-aged man in a gray coat whispered to his wife, "They're going too far." His wife, clutching a shopping bag, nodded, lips pressed tight. The manager snapped her head toward the sound, eyes narrowing at the young woman filming. "Put that phone down. This is store policy. She's trespassing." But the words didn't land like they used to. The spell of authority was cracking. The young woman swallowed hard but didn't lower her phone. Her voice shook less this time. "Policy isn't slapping someone in front of a crowd." Gasps rippled. A mother holding her daughter's hand whispered, "She's right." The girl, wide-eyed, clutched tighter. Behind the counter, the clerk muttered loud enough to be heard, "Oh, please. She's probably just here to cause trouble. Don't get fooled." His laugh was thin, nervous. A man standing near the entrance adjusted his glasses and spoke up firmer. "I've been watching. She didn't do anything wrong." His voice wasn't loud, but it was steady, the kind of tone that sticks. For the first time, the guards hesitated. Their training told them to follow orders, but their eyes told them something different. The woman in cream stood unflinching, the crowd no longer silent. Elise's gaze flicked briefly toward the young woman filming. Just a glance, calm, steady, almost like permission. Then her eyes returned to the manager, unblinking. That glance was enough. The young woman whispered into her phone again, "She's not afraid, and I won't be either." The manager's jaw tightened, her voice sharp as glass. "Security, stop her filming now." But the command no longer carried weight, because once one witness speaks, silence becomes impossible for the rest. The man near the entrance spoke louder this time. "Are you really going to throw her out? For what? For existing?" Customers shifted. Some crossed their arms. Others stepped closer. The hum of the store had changed. It was no longer compliance. It was conscience. The clerk tried again, his smirk faltering. "She doesn't belong." But a voice cut him off, clear and sharp from the crowd. "Number, you don't belong. Treating people like that." The room erupted, not in shouts, but in murmurs that swelled like a rising tide. And through it all, Elise stayed silent. hands folded, face calm, because she knew the truth. Sometimes justice doesn't start with power. It starts with one witness brave enough to say, "This is wrong." The murmurs swelled until the store felt less like a showroom and more like a trial. Phones hovered, recording every second. Witnesses had spoken, but the manager wasn't retreating, she was doubling down. Her heels struck the marble with sharp cracks as she stepped closer to Elise. "Enough of this circus. You are not a client. You are a fraud." Her voice sliced through the crowd, deliberate and rehearsed, meant to reclaim authority. Elise did not blink. She let the insult hang, as heavy as the silence that followed. A man in a tailored suit emerged from the back office, his badge clipped neatly to his jacket. Senior staff. His tone oozed confidence. "Ma'am, this isn't the place for stunts. You've disrupted operations long enough." He folded his arms, scanning Elise from head to toe like she was inventory that didn't pass inspection. "She doesn't even look like she belongs here," he added. "Dressed like that, please." The clerk chuckled nervously, relieved to have backup. "Exactly. Thank you." The words rippled across the crowd like acid. Some gasped, others shook their heads in disgust. The young woman filming whispered, "Did you hear that?" Her phone trembled in her hand. The manager's smirk returned, fueled by the reinforcement. She gestured broadly to the shelves gleaming with handbags and cases. "This is a premium space. We don't tolerate imposters pretending to be what they're not." Elise remained silent, posture steady, eyes fixed ahead. The sting of words was sharper than the slap, but she had worn this armor for years. The man in the suit pressed on, voice laced with arrogance. "I don't care if you found a credit card or borrowed one. That doesn't make you a client here, and it certainly doesn't buy you respect." The crowd stirred. A woman near the jewelry counter shook her head. "This is disgusting," she muttered. A man beside her nodded, jaw tight. Still, Elise did not react. The manager waved her hand dismissively, as if brushing dirt from silk. "Security, stop wasting time. Escort her outside. Let the police handle the rest." One of the guards shifted uneasily. His eyes flicked from Elise to the phones in the crowd. He'd seen enough to know this wasn't going to stay within four walls. Elise's silence held the weight of history. At 28, she'd once been called high risk by a loan officer, even with collateral triple the requirement. At 32, a hotel clerk insisted her reservation was fake until she stood outside in the cold. And now, years later, in a store she owned, the same verdict echoed again. But she had learned something vital. Power doesn't need to shout. It only needs to endure until the truth becomes undeniable. The manager leaned in, voice dripping with condescension. "You're wasting everyone's time. This store isn't for you. It never will be." Gasps rippled through the room. The crowd was no longer just watching. They were waiting to see if dignity could stand taller than arrogance. And Elise, silent as stone, gave them their answer. Because her stillness wasn't emptiness. It was a storm gathering strength. The store no longer felt like a showroom. It was a stage, every polished marble tile reflecting the weight of what was happening. And then the manager crossed the final line. With a swift motion, she snatched the slim leather clutch from Elise's hand. The sound was sharp, a rip in the stillness. Gasps burst from the crowd. The manager held it high, like evidence in a trial, her lips curling into a cruel smile. "Fake," she declared, loud enough for the chandelier to rattle. "Just like her story." The clerk clapped once, a single hollow sound that died in the silence. "Told you," he muttered, his smirk faltering even as he tried to look confident. The manager slammed the clutch onto the counter, flipping it open with performative disgust. "Security, call the police. We're detaining her until they arrive. Fraudulent cards, fraudulent ID. This ends now." One guard pressed his radio, voice low but clear. "Dispatch, we've got a suspect. Requesting immediate response." The word suspect echoed like a gunshot in the quiet. The young woman filming gasped audibly, her phone shaking. "They just took her bag," she whispered, voice cracking with disbelief. Another customer, a man in his 50s, muttered to no one in particular, "This is theft. That's not protocol." The senior staffer in the suit leaned casually against the counter, arms folded. "Don't bother checking," he sneered. "People like her always find a way to slip through, but not today." The insult landed heavy, the same phrase Elise had carried for decades. People like her. The crowd stirred uneasily. Some shifted closer, unwilling to look away. Others whispered, Phones raised higher. One man whispered, "She hasn't moved. She hasn't even spoken." And it was true. Elise remained still, eyes steady, face unreadable. The slap had not broken her. The insult had not cracked her. And even now, as her property was seized, as police were summoned, her silence remained intact. But silence has a sound, and in this room it was deafening. The manager leaned over the counter, voice triumphant. "Look at her. Nothing to say because she knows she's caught." She glanced at the phones, smirk widening. "Record this. Let everyone see what happens when liars try to play rich." The words dripped venom. They weren't policy, they were personal. Gasps echoed again, louder this time. The young woman filming turned her camera to the crowd. "You're all seeing this, right? She didn't do anything. They slapped her. They took her bag. And now they're calling the cops." The murmurs became open protest. A mother whispered fiercely, "This is wrong." A teenager near the back said louder, "They can't do that." But the manager only straightened her blazer, satisfied, believing she had won. Elise inhaled once, slow, controlled. The crowd saw a woman humiliated. The manager saw a problem erased. But Elise knew what was coming. Because storms don't announce themselves with thunder first. They begin with silence. And her silence was about to break. The clutch lay open on the counter, her cards and ID splayed like trophies in the manager's hands. The word fraud still hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. The guard's radio buzzed faintly with dispatch chatter, but Elise did not flinch. Instead, she moved. Not fast, not loud, just deliberate. She reached into the pocket of her cream sweater and pulled out her phone. The action was small, quiet, yet it shifted the air more than the slap had. The manager scoffed, mistaking calm for desperation. "Go ahead, call whoever you want. No one's saving you." But Elise wasn't calling for rescue. She was activating control. Her thumb pressed a single number. The line clicked instantly. "Protocol," Elise said, her voice low, steady, controlled. "Activate it, now." On the other end, a crisp voice answered without hesitation. "Understood. Protocol engaged. You're live." The crowd froze. The young woman filming whispered, "Did you hear that?" She said protocol. The word hung like static, unfamiliar but powerful. The manager laughed, brittle and forced. "Oh, how cute. She's got a code word. Security, don't let her stall. The police are on their way." But something had shifted. Elise's posture straightened, her silence no longer passive but commanding. She turned her gaze slowly toward the guards, her voice calm but firm. "Every word you've spoken is being logged. Every action you take is now recorded at corporate level. Choose wisely." The guard who had touched her earlier stiffened, his hand falling fully away. The radio at his shoulder crackled, but he didn't answer. His eyes darted to the phones raised around the room, then back to Elise. The senior staffer scoffed, trying to reclaim ground. "Don't let her bluff you. She's nobody. Just a woman with a phone and a fake card." Elise tilted her head, finally speaking directly to him. "You think silence means weakness, but silence is strategy, and yours just ended." Gasps rolled through the crowd. The clerk's smirk faltered completely. The voice on the phone returned, calm and sharp. "Phase 1 complete. Incident is logged. Cameras in store are linked. Audio is being captured in real time. Awaiting your next instruction." The crowd shifted, uneasy, whispering. The young woman filming turned her phone toward herself, wide-eyed. "She's not bluffing. Something's happening." The manager's face reddened. "What nonsense is this? You don't control anything here." Elise met her eyes, unblinking. "That's where you're wrong." The words were quiet, but they landed like thunder. Because this wasn't a plea, it was the opening strike, and the room felt it. The manager's laugh was brittle, a sharp edge masking unease. "Wrong," she repeated, raising her voice so the crowd could hear. "You're standing here accused of fraud, and you think you're in control?" Elise didn't move. She let the silence stretch just long enough for the tension to suffocate the room. Then she spoke low, clear, and measured. "I am not in control." A pause. The crowd held its breath. "I own control." Gasps rippled like waves against glass. Phones caught the words, their red lights blinking faster as if the devices themselves understood the gravity of what was said. The manager blinked, confusion fighting with disbelief. "Excuse me?" Elise stepped forward, not rushing but deliberate. Every movement weighted. She pointed calmly to the clutch lying open on the counter, her cards displayed like accusations. Those are not fake. They are mine. And so is this store. Whispers erupted, growing louder. She said she owns it. What does she mean? Is that possible? The senior staffer scoffed, desperate to hold ground. Ridiculous. You expect us to believe you own a luxury chain? Dressed like that? Elise turned her gaze on him, unflinching. I dressed like this so you could show yourselves. And you did. The words landed like a verdict. The young woman filming nearly dropped her phone. Oh my God, she whispered into the mic. She owns it. She really owns it. The clerk's smirk had evaporated, his eyes wide. No, she's lying. She has to be. But Elise was not done. She raised her phone once more, pressing speaker. The crisp voice from the other end filled the store. Confirmation. Elise Monroe, founder and chief executive officer, Monroe Luxury Group, majority shareholder. Every action in this store is under her direct authority. The voice wasn't just corporate, it was final. The room shifted in an instant. The crowd's murmurs turned into open gasps. A man near the entrance said aloud, "She's the owner?" Another added, "They slapped the CEO." The guard, who had reached for her earlier, dropped his eyes to the floor, stepping back slowly, his hands raised as if distance could erase what had already been done. The manager's face drained of color. No, this can't be real." Her voice cracked, brittle where it had once been sharp. Elise's calm didn't waver. She stood taller now, voice steady, commanding without effort. "You slapped the owner of this store, you called me a fraud in a company I built. And now, every person watching knows exactly who I am." Gasps gave way to clapping scattered at first, then louder, until the sound filled the chandelier-lit room. Phones tilted higher, capturing not humiliation, but revelation. The power in the room had shifted, and the manager, pale and trembling, finally realized she wasn't standing in front of a problem. She was standing in front of her boss. For a moment, the store hung in stunned silence, the chandelier's light gleaming off marble like an indifferent witness. Then reality hit. The manager's face drained of color, lips parting but no words forming. The confidence that had fueled her slap, her insults, her performance, it all evaporated in a single revelation. She wasn't humiliating a stranger. She had struck her employer. The clerk behind the counter stumbled back a step, the smirk gone, replaced by wide-eyed panic. He muttered under his breath, No, I didn't know." His hands fumbled with the register keys as though busywork could shield him from consequence. The senior staffer's arms, once folded with arrogance, dropped to his sides. He swallowed hard, glancing at the crowd, then at Elise. His composure cracked like thin glass. The guards shifted uneasily, their radios buzzing faintly but ignored. The one who had reached for Elise earlier stepped back completely, eyes lowered, as if retreat could erase his part in the scene. Meanwhile, the customers erupted. What began as gasps turned into cheers. A ripple of clapping grew, louder, bolder. A woman near the jewelry case raised her voice. "That's justice." Another shouted, "We saw everything." Phones tilted higher, steady now, capturing the collapse in real time. Clips were already uploading, hashtags forming before the guards even realized what was happening. One teenager muttered to his friend, "This is gonna blow up online." His friend whispered back, "It already has." The young woman in the denim jacket, still filming, whispered into her mic, "The manager slapped her, and she's the CEO. Everyone's seeing this." Her voice trembled, not with fear but awe. The store was no longer under the manager's command. It was Elise's courtroom now, and every witness was a juror. The manager finally found her voice, but it cracked, brittle and desperate. I didn't know. This was a misunderstanding." Elise's gaze cut her off. Calm, steady, absolute. "You knew enough," Elise said. The words were quiet, but they fell like a gavel. The clerk's knees buckled slightly, his bravado gone. The senior staffer adjusted his tie with shaking hands, and the guards, once pillars of authority, stood awkwardly at the edges, powerless, unsure whether to salute or shrink. The crowd filled the silence with clapping again, louder this time, echoing off glass cases and polished stone. One customer raised his phone high, declaring to his live stream, "This is history. We're watching justice live." The room had shifted completely. What had been arrogance at the center was now fear. What had been silence at the margins was now applause. And standing at the eye of it all was Elise Monroe, calm, collected, unshaken, watching her empire recognize its owner. The applause faded into a tense quiet, all eyes fixed on Elise. The manager trembled behind the counter, clutching the stolen clutch like a shield. The clerk bit his lip, pale. The senior staffer shifted from foot to foot, his confidence gone. Elise lifted her phone once more, her voice calm but final. Log this. Effective immediately terminate their access. Manager, senior staff, and clerk. Remove their credentials. The voice on the line responded crisp. Confirmed. Processing now. It happened instantly. The manager's badge, clipped to her blazer, buzzed with a sharp red light. She looked down in horror, pressing it against the sensor on the register denied. The clerk tried his own, his shaking hand slamming it against the terminal denied. The senior staffer pulled his out, muttering, No, this can't be. His two flashed red. Gasps filled the store. Customers leaned forward, phones capturing every second. You're done, Elise said, her voice low but carrying. Not tomorrow, not after review, right now. The manager's eyes welled with panic. Please, it was a mistake, I didn't know. Elise's gaze cut her off like a blade. You called me a fraud in a store I own. You struck me in front of witnesses. You mocked me with the authority I gave you. There is no mistake. There is only consequence. The clerk tried to speak, but his voice cracked into silence. The senior staffer gripped his useless badge, sweat lining his temple. The guards took a cautious step back, no longer protectors of management, but neutral observers in a courtroom they hadn't expected. The young woman filming whispered, She just fired them. Live, right here. Her voice shook with awe. Elise turned her phone back to her side, eyes sweeping the room. Her words were steady, deliberate, unshakable. Consider this your final lesson. Power is not a costume you put on. It is responsibility, and you failed. The store held its breath. No one moved. No one dared. Because justice had been delivered, and the verdict was irreversible. The store was silent now, but not empty. It was filled with the weight of justice, of truth laid bare. The crowd of customers still held their phones high, but their eyes weren't on the glowing screens anymore. They were fixed on Elise. The manager stood frozen, badge dead in her hand. The clerk stared at the floor, shame carved across his face. The senior staffer shook his head like denial could undo reality. But the verdict had already been passed. Their reign was over. Elise didn't gloat. She didn't raise her voice. She simply breathed, then spoke calm, deliberate, every word landing like stone. I don't need to record you. I am the result of every recording like this. Every insult, every dismissal, every slap I endured built the company you tried to erase me from today. And now you know. Silence is not weakness. It's the sound of power choosing its moment. A hush swept the crowd. Then, as if pulled by a single thread, the applause rose again. Stronger this time. Not scattered, not hesitant, unified. The room filled with clapping, with voices, with something heavier than spectacle, respect. The young woman in the denim jacket lowered her phone, tears shining in her eyes. She didn't even yell, she whispered. And she still won. A man near the door nodded, adding softly, That's real power. Elise looked once around the room at the marble floors, at the chandelier, at the faces of strangers who had become witnesses. She offered them not a smile but a truth, sharp and unforgettable. Respect is not optional. Dignity is not negotiable. Remember that the next time you choose who belongs. With that, she picked up her clutch from the counter, not as evidence, not as property reclaimed, but as a reminder of what had been stolen and returned. She turned, calm and unhurried, walking toward the doors that had once been her trial and were now her triumph. The cameras followed her. The applause carried her. The silence she left behind was not empty. It was transformed. Because in that store, under the glittering chandelier, Elise Monroe had done more than fire staff. She had written a lesson, and the world was already reading it.